Welcome back. You're listening to the panel discussion, Keys to Digital Transformation in Government, sponsored by Booz Allen Hamilton on federalnewsradio.com and 1500 AM. I'm your host, Jason Miller. My guests today are John Owens, the Chief Information Officer at the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, George Chambers, the Executive Director of the Office of IT Infrastructure Operations at the Department of Health and Human Services, Bill Zielinski, the Deputy Assistant Commissioner for the IT Category Management in the Federal Acquisition Service at the General Services Administration, and Gary Lebovich, the Executive Vice President at Booz Allen Hamilton. Gentlemen, before break, we started down that path of culture and Agile and DevOps and how that all kind of starts to fit together. George, you want to jump in and start with that discussion a little bit. When you talking Agile and you start talking about the culture change, how are you dealing with that at HHS?
So I wanted to piggyback off of what Bill was talking about GSA in terms of acquisitions and Gary's mention about maturity. At HHS, we have a pretty federated organization, so there's various levels of maturity across the enterprise. And what was surprising to a number of us, especially in my group, which I have also enterprise applications, I went through a long series of training for my development teams to understand Agile. And so once we believed we got it, then we started to introduce it to our customers. They embraced the idea, okay, we're going to give you functionality sooner versus later. We were looking at 3-month deliveries and then being able to follow that up with multiple deliveries. But the education that was required by our stakeholders, our customers, was much more significant than I ever anticipated. In particular, they were not willing to sign off on a core functionality, an initial operating capability, because they were concerned, okay, that's all I get, right? And so nobody wants to sign off, and yet you can't go down the Agile process without having a complete break, and now we're into phase 2, 3, 4. And that drives back to the acquisition. Likewise, you're not signing off on what traditionally in the waterfall is called a deliverable, right? Because initial operating capability is being discussed in a different way than what we traditionally thought at one point in time. So I believe that education around DevOps, around Agile, is just in its infancy in terms of what we need to do with our stakeholders and users.
So I guess the one quick follow-up, I'm going to jump into some of the other panelists, but how did you educate them? How did you have to do, it's the easy wins, that's what we hear a lot about.
Exactly. When you end up having a group or two finally say, yes, we're taking this capability and we believe that you're going to continue to give us functionality, it starts to spread the word. Now, from an initial 2 or 3 pilots of Agile at the enterprise level, we seem to be now into the dozen realm. And that's been over the past 2 years. So it could be geometric. And I speak for just, once again, a more immature portion of our overall. CDC has a strong Agile development group as well as NIH.
And FDA. I know we've talked to Todd Simpson.
Yep.
John, jump in.
So I thank you, George, for bringing that up, because I have to tell you that's a big deal for me, too. Not all customers, even internally, are created equal. We went through a stint on some projects where the customer didn't understand really after training what acceptance was, and no one likes getting their product accepted and then after multiple releases they're like, no, we didn't really mean that, and like, well, what do you mean you didn't mean that? You accepted it. and then they went into further clarification of, oh, well, they didn't really understand what their requirements were. So they were, we were going down a path where we were building what they wanted, but they weren't quite comfortable with what they asked for, and then there was all these variances, and you find out that really sometimes your customer needs to understand what they want too. And because we were treating all of our customers the same, we were getting different results, right? Customers with really strong technical backgrounds were producing really strong products eventually, and customers with lighter technical backgrounds or less of an understanding, not so strong, not as involved in the process. Of course, then they want to run back to waterfall, and you're like, no, we're not going to allow you to do that. We're going to have to sit back in here, and then they spend a lot of their time and energy arguing for waterfall when we know that's not the right thing to do. I mean, the evidence out there is overwhelming that results are better with Agile. So that cultural change, that education is continuous and never-ending, particularly as senior leaders leave the organizations, and you have to keep reiterating and reiterating. And it's a fantastic point you brought up.
Let me ask John a quick follow-up. I know, Gary, you want to jump in. When they want to resort back to waterfall, or when they want to go, well, that's not what we asked for, and you're like, well, actually, it is what you asked for. Well, that's not what we want. What do you have to do from a CIO's perspective for someone who's running those DevOps teams? What's the process what's the education piece? Because there's two sets of education, right? There's the, hey, we're going to do this, bring everyone together, let's talk about it. And then there's the as we go along education.
Well, part of DevOps is fail fast, right? And when you're in a situation where you have a failure, and I think we have all had them, and if no one wants to admit that, I think we've got a different problem. And all right, we have a failure now. We've not delivered what you wanted. We have blameless postmortems and those other type of cultural things to help bring out the best in people and stop the finger pointing and so on and so forth. But eventually you've got to take a step back, reset, and convince your customer that no, you're not going to run back to what you know, that old method. You're going to do this again, but you're going to make some significant change. And that's not always easy. The education helps, but eventually you've got to have enough, like George said, hey, look, we've used this. We've gotten good results here. We've shut off some systems. We've made progress. It was faster, better, cheaper. You knew up front whether or not you failed. Now that we've had a failure and everyone has one, how are you going to handle it? And that's as important in a culture of how you handle failure as how you handle success.
George, jump in.
I just wanted to mention, you had asked about the techniques of trying to get the education out there, and it's more than just the experience end of it. I've created a set of colloquia we do on a monthly basis for my IT teams, both infrastructure and on the application side. And what we've tried to do is not only bring our feds and our contractors together around Agile concepts and things of that nature, but now we've opened up to our main customer group as well, so they can participate in the dialogue and be a part of an education process. So, everybody sort of baselines into, because it's okay to deliver something wrong. I mean, that's the whole idea. That's the whole idea, right? But the question becomes, what can you use? So at least we're using something. You got to use something in order for you to get to the next phase and the phase after that, because otherwise you're always stuck in that pilot pre-production, and then nobody benefits out of that because you're running multiple systems. So,
Gary, I know you've been waiting patiently. Jump in.
No, fine. One of the things we do, particularly with new agencies that haven't been attuned to this, is we do Agile Coaching. We actually bring a coach into the situation and really sit down with the client staff and really walk them through the process. Along with that, we have a Agile playbook and a DevOps playbook, which really describes the roles, the pace, what's different, what to expect. So there's an education process that's ongoing that we can use both to define the methodology and to help people get their heads around it. We do a project right now at VA. We have 25 Scrum teams simultaneously operating. And when it comes time for user acceptance tests, we actually invite the VA clients to come with us. We have a facility down in South Carolina. And it's fascinating to watch the interaction between the clients and our team working together to do quarterly releases of a very large benefits management system for VA. And I can't imagine doing this project under the old model. It just wouldn't happen. And this is probably one of the most important systems in the government. It's the benefits management system for our veterans. So we've come a long way. It's an education process and helping clients get attuned to where we're going.
That's a fascinating example of number on 25 Scrum teams at once, but the fact is you're bringing in clients. Bill, jump in.
So a couple of observations, Jason. I think three things we hear broadly from agencies. I think number one is that idea, you got to get started somewhere. You got to start to have some successes. You have to start to demonstrate. So in terms of getting folks involved, start. The second one is that idea of you always have to be having that top cover from leadership, showing the commitment that yes, this may be different from what we've done before, but you have to have that. And then the third thing is the idea that you can have a conversation about risks and how this approach really does both buy down the risks in terms of costs, but also buys down the risk in terms of you've executed, and at the end of the day, you got something that you didn't ask for. So I think those are things we hear more broadly, is that conversation about risks, the idea of top cover, and the idea of got to get started. We do have, to Gary's point about kind of helping and guiding folks through. The first thing I'd mention is the U.S. Digital Service. Tracy Walker is an individual there who this is kind of her life's work, if you will, and she's a person who does and can work with agencies as it relates to acquisition and agile approaches in acquisition. Secondly, if an agency needs a lot of help and assistance in our assisted acquisition service, they can kind of take them from cradle to grave through helping agencies do that entire walkthrough. And then on the backside, when you talk about the solutions that we build within the Federal Acquisition Service, we provide templates. We provide kind of an easy button for them to do that. And then finally, within the Technology Transformation Service in 18F, they do ghost writing on any number of different products, as well as do that assistance with agencies. So there's a lot of resources, as Gary says. If somebody needs that assistance to move forward, there's a lot of choices for agencies to be able to make that move forward.
I want to go back to John on something. We've talked a lot about the customer, and when we define customer, it's usually the internal customer. For you, it may be the patent side or the trademark side of PTO, but at the same time, you have an external customer. How do you include them in it? And Gary, I'll go to you next with the veterans, because I want to hear more about how when you bring the users in. But John, start us off.
So we have 2 advisory committees appointed by the Secretary of Commerce, one for patents and one from trademarks, TPAC and PPAC. Public Advisory Committee is what PAC stands for. We, of course, demo all the internal systems and external systems to them. They're kind of our guidance. But also, when we do, right now, for example, we're building a new patents intake system to intake text. It's going out to a small public user group. They're commenting on it. We updated our legacy system to intake text while we're building the new system. And then the new system goes out for comment to them, and we go through an iterative model. That's going to fully go out to folks, I think, in the December timeframe. So we try to include the customer, and I don't just mean management. I actually, internally, I actually mean our union folks, right? We have 3 unions at the USPTO. We try to bring them in as often as possible, along with management, to make sure that their interaction is very strong, since they are the end users. Same thing with the public. Demo it to them, show them it. We have a My USPTO product where they can come in and log in as an external customer and customize their views and get notifications that they're focused on in a way that they can adapt to. And that's new. And we took multiple iterations through the PACs, through public comment periods, to try to get them involved. Because at the end of the day, if you're not meeting their needs, they're going to be like, well, you spent our user fees on something, but it's not what we wanted. And that's even worse, since we're user-funded fee-funded organization.
There's a much more direct feeling
Very.
Versus us as taxpayers go, well, I just paid my taxes to the government,
Right.
wherever they do with it. Exactly. Gary, jump in about the user side of it, because I think the external customer is so important in this discussion.
On this project, given the high priority, this is the system that's used by our veterans to make their doctor's appointments, their health records, to inquire about insurance, et cetera. We sit down at the beginning of every year and we have a list of objectives for the system, a set of enhancements, knowing full well that we're going to get into the agile process, and some of those are going to change, some of those are going to fall out. But the clients are very engaged from day one on every year. And so we define a set of objectives. We go through a quarterly process. When it's time to introduce user acceptance tests, we have about 40 clients who actually come down to South Carolina, sit in a big room with us, and we go through an agile user acceptance test where they're sitting with our folks, we're looking at the code, we're testing the code, they're offering enhancements and adjustments, and at the end of the 2-week period, we have a system that we're ready to roll out. We go right into implementation. We have a DevOps methodology, so that as you might imagine, it's a 24/7 application. It needs to be up continuously. There is no downtime. It's 24/7, 365 days a year, and we use DevOps to ensure that we have continuity on the maintenance side.
George.
It's interesting, and I applaud how far you've gone with the VA. We were wrestling at HHS as far back as 2011, dealing with the open data and how do you engage the public with the valued asset that we have. And before Agile, before DevOps, you still have to engage the public. And we wrestled with how to open that up. And so as part of healthdata.gov, which is an HHS initiative opening up as many as 1,500 different databases to the public, We created another ancillary website that was demand-driven open data. And the whole idea is that we would engage by making it very easy for individuals in the public to request data sets from the government, whether they knew it or not, that would help either individuals or organizations build cottage industries around health data. So the idea was this now front end allowed a group of our analysts to understand, hey, this is what the public's asking for. In the first month that we opened it up, we had 40 different requests for data sets that weren't available, that we then would assess, prioritize, and see, hey, which ones are the quickest we can bring to bear. And within 2 months, we had at least 3 data sets out there. And once again, that creates jobs, it creates opportunities, and it also provides the public the value for what they're paying for.
Bill, let me turn to you on this one as well. Bring us into the contracting side in the sense of when you guys are putting together a contract and the Agile piece of it and ensuring there's user testing. So I guess, one, is there a contract for, hey, I want to get user testing, somebody will provide those services? And then 2, how do you ensure that the agency is not trying to lean back towards the waterfall method when you see a contract that says, here's 40 things to do over the next 5 years type thing?
So a couple things really quickly. Yes, we are exploring, while there's vendors and providers right now in all of our solutions that are out there that provide customer experience, user testing, other sorts of aspects of that, we're actually specifically looking at putting together a more specifically scoped vehicle in and around customer experience and user testing. I will say again, we're kind of sitting between industry and agency, so that idea of customer is a little bit different for us. We really don't have a mission unto ourselves. Our mission is to further the mission of the agencies who are our customers. But we do have, in telecommunications, for example, we just awarded the Enterprise Infrastructure Solutions. We worked very closely with both industry and with agencies. We have an infrastructure advisory group that's actually chaired by agencies, and they really are driving those requirements. But at the end of the day, we have to ensure that there's that interaction between both those customer agencies as well as industry, and the results of those efforts, those forums, those workshops, those industry days, the series of events that put together to bring those things together results in the EIS contract that's out there today. So we very much have an eye towards ensuring that whatever we're putting out there works both for industry as well as for agencies.
And without a doubt, EIS, huge success, considering how big it is, and I think you only got one, we'll call it minor protest. We're going to take a quick break and come in. We'll jump into the next set of questions, which deals with the technology side of this transformation. You're listening to the panel discussion, Keys to Digital Transformation in Government, sponsored by Booz Allen Hamilton on federalnewsradio.com and 1500 AM.